Have you ever felt truly alone, nestled in the quiet comfort of your own home, only to be met by a silent, inexplicable presence just beyond your threshold? It's a primal fear, one echoed in countless true accounts, in those chilling, let's not meet stories that cling to the edges of our memory. This is one such tale, a subtle intrusion into the peace of a rainy night, a whisper of unease that once settled, refuses to leave. It was a night much like this, a steady drum of rain against the window pane, a soothing rhythm that lulled the world outside into a soft, indistinct hum. Inside, the air was warm, the light soft, casting gentle shadows across familiar objects. You were there, perfectly safe, perfectly alone, wrapped in the quiet cocoon of your own space. Then, a sound, almost imperceptible against the downpour, a soft, tentative tap at the door, not urgent, not demanding, just there. Hesitantly, you drew back the curtain, peering through the glass, and in the dim glow of the porch light, amidst the swirling rain, a figure stood, motionless, silent, facing your house. It wasn't trying to get in, wasn't making a sound, just existing, an unmoving silhouette under the relentless rain, watching. The breath caught in your throat, a sharp, involuntary gasp that felt disproportionately loud in the hushed, rain-soaked night. Your hand, still pressed against the cool pane, seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy, a lingering echo of the figure's silent vigil. You pulled back, not in a sudden, panicked jerk, but with a slow, almost reverent retreat, as if fearing any abrupt movement might shatter the fragile truce of the moment, or worse, acknowledge the impossible presence. Your eyes, though no longer fixed on the window, still felt the weight of that unwavering gaze upon them, an invisible pressure that seemed to pierce through the glass, through the very walls of your sanctuary, and settle uncomfortably deep within your skull. The rain outside continued its ceaseless, murmuring symphony, a low, comforting drone that now felt subtly sinister, a monotonous lullaby designed to mask something else, something unnatural. Each drop hitting the window pane, each ripple in a nearby puddle, seemed to hold a secret, a silent affirmation of the unsettling sight. You tried to dismiss it, to rationalize the image away. It was late. Your mind was tired. The shadows played tricks. Perhaps it was just a neighbor seeking shelter, though their stillness, their utter lack of discernible purpose, defied any logical explanation. No one simply stood in the pouring rain, silent and unmoving, staring at a stranger's home for so long. The thought tightened the cold knot in your stomach, a small, insistent tremor that began to spread through your limbs. You turned your back to the door, deliberately, almost defiantly, attempting to sever the unspoken connection. The warmth of the room, once so inviting, now felt almost suffocating, an oppressive blanket that couldn't quite ward off the encroaching chill that was more internal than external. You moved towards the living room, a space usually filled with a quiet sense of peace, the faint scent of old paperbacks and the subtle aroma of the tea you'd been nursing earlier. Your footsteps, usually soft and familiar, now seemed to echo, each tread a conscious effort to reclaim a sense of normalcy that felt increasingly distant. as you walk past a large, ornate mirror that hung opposite the living room window. A fleeting glimpse of movement in your peripheral vision snagged your attention. It was too quick, too ephemeral to be certain. A mere ripple in the smooth surface of your perception. You paused, a fraction of a second, your breath catching again, lighter this time, a silent question forming on your lips. What was that? You didn't consciously turn your head, your body still orienting away from the window, but your eyes, drawn by an invisible thread, flickered towards the mirror. And there it was. Not a clear image, not a solid form, but a subtle distortion, a haze within the reflection. It wasn't your reflection, not truly. It was as if the glass had momentarily captured something else, something behind you, superimposed over the familiar contours of your own room. A faint, almost transparent silhouette, undeniably similar to the one you had just witnessed outside, seemed to hover in the background, a ghostly after-image caught in the polished surface. It was still, utterly, unnervingly still. It wasn't moving, wasn't threatening, just existing in that hazy, indistinct reflection, a silent observer within your own home. A wave of cold washed over you, a prickle spreading rapidly across your skin, raising the fine hairs on your arms and the back of your neck. Your heart, which had begun to slow its nervous rhythm, now lurched, a sudden, frantic beat against your ribs. You blinked, once, twice, and in that instantaneous shift of light and focus, the distortion vanished. The mirror once again showed only your living room, the soft lamplight reflecting off the polished wood, the muted patterns of your upholstery, and your own face, pale and wide-eyed, staring back. The image was gone, completely. Only the faint tremor in your hands and the rapid pulse thrumming behind your ears served as testament to what you had, or thought you had, just witnessed. Had it been a trick of the light, a residual image burned onto your retina from staring too long into the dark outside the rain, perhaps creating an odd refraction? Or was it simply the vivid imagination of a person alone in their house, overwrought by a bizarre, unbidden visit? You desperately sought a logical explanation, grasping at straws, trying to anchor yourself back to the solid ground of reality. But the seed of doubt had been planted, cold and sharp, burrowing deep into the fertile soil of your weary mind. The speed with which it appeared and disappeared, the sheer impossibility of it, gnawed at you. It felt too real, too specific, to be merely a figment of imagination. Yet, conversely, it was too fleeting, too subtle, to be dismissed as an obvious hallucination. It occupied a terrifying middle ground, a liminal space where reality itself seemed to flex and waver, shifting like the reflections in the rain-streaked glass. You stood there, transfixed by your own reflection, searching for answers in the depths of your pupils, in the subtle tension around your mouth. The person staring back seemed different, not physically, but in the subtle shadow that now seemed to cling to the edges of your gaze. A nascent flicker of fear that had not been there moments before. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant rumble of a car passing on the wet street, even the ceaseless patter of the rain itself, all seemed to take on a new, unnerving resonance, as if They were conspiring to amplify the silence that now screamed within your head. The feeling of being watched, which had originated from beyond the threshold, had now subtly, insidiously, migrated inward. It wasn't merely the memory of the figure outside. It was the chilling sensation that the act of being observed had somehow seeped into the very fabric of your perception, twisting your own sense of reality. You ran a hand through your hair, a gesture of nervous habit, and found your skin surprisingly clammy. The warmth of the room now felt less like comfort and more like a gentle pressure, pushing against the rising tide of internal disquiet. This wasn't a jump scare. There was no sudden jolt, no scream caught in your throat. It was far more insidious, a slow, deliberate unwinding of your sense of security, piece by careful piece. The mirror, a familiar object of self-recognition, had just betrayed you, not by showing something monstrous, but by showing something unreal in a way that felt utterly, terrifyingly real. It was a silent challenge to your own senses, a whisper that perhaps, just perhaps, what you perceived to be solid and true was, in fact, a fragile construct, ready to splinter at the slightest touch. The world, once so defined, so dependable, was beginning to blur at its edges, dissolving into an unsettling, hypnotic flow of doubt. The mirror's polished surface, now innocently reflecting only the quiet elegance of the living room, offered no further apparitions, no lingering spectres. Yet, the cold shock it had delivered pulsed beneath your skin, a phantom echo of an image that shouldn't have been. You slowly turned away, not out of conviction that the threat was gone, but because facing it, even in reflection, felt like acknowledging an impossibility you weren't ready to accept. The memory of that hazy silhouette, superimposed upon your own domestic scene, clung to the edges of your vision. A persistent after-image burnt into your mind's eye. You tried to re-engage with the mundane, to anchor yourself in the familiar rhythms of the night. Your half-finished cup of tea sat cooling on the coffee table. A forgotten bookmark jutted from a novel, its pages still crisp and unread. You reached for the tea, the ceramic mug warm against your fingertips, but the familiar scent of Earl Grey failed to soothe. Each sip felt heavy, a deliberate act to prove to yourself that normalcy was still attainable, that the strange, unsettling events were mere products of an overactive imagination, fueled by solitude and the relentless drumming of the rain. The house, once your fortress of quiet comfort, now seemed to press in on you, its very stillness amplifying the disquiet that had taken root within. The rain, which had been a constant, monotonous drone throughout the evening, now seemed to shift its rhythm, becoming a more intricate, almost performative backdrop. Its steady percussion against the windows and the roof blended seamlessly with the deeper rumble of distant thunder, creating a symphony that was both enveloping and isolating. It was within this rich tapestry of sound that the first, almost imperceptible deviation occurred, a sound so faint, so fleeting, that it barely registered consciously. A soft, almost metallic clink, like two small, light objects brushing against each other, or perhaps a latch shifting, originating from the hallway, just beyond the living room archway. Your hand, midway to bringing the mug to your lips, paused, Your head tilted almost imperceptibly, a purely reflexive action, like an animal detecting a faint predator scent on the wind. It was gone as quickly as it came, subsumed by the relentless patter of the rain. What was that? Your mind, instantly alert, searched for a logical explanation. The old house settling, a gust of wind rattling a poorly fitted fixture, the central heating system clicking on. Though you hadn't felt a drop in temperature, you strained your ears, listening not just to the rain, but through it, trying to discern if the sound would repeat, if it had truly been there at all. The silence that followed felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken possibilities. You tried to dismiss it, picking up your book with a deliberate hand, forcing your eyes to track the familiar words. Yet, your focus remained fractured, your peripheral hearing stretched taut, listening for anything out of place. The narrative on the page blurred, the rhythm of the sentences failing to capture your attention. The air in the room, previously comfortable, now felt thin, almost charged, prickling at your skin. A low, persistent hum from the refrigerator in the kitchen, a sound you rarely noticed, suddenly seemed amplified, a mechanical heartbeat in the otherwise unnervingly quiet house. Then, it came again, even softer this time, barely a whisper on the edge of audibility. A faint, almost imperceptible creak. Not a loud, startling groan of old wood, but a soft, delicate sigh, as if a featherweight foot had gently touched a loose floorboard. It seemed to emanate from the upper floor, directly above the living room, near the hallway leading to the bedrooms. But there was no one else in the house. You were certain. The sound was so subtle, so ephemeral, that you could almost convince yourself it was merely the product of your heightened anxiety. A phantom noise conjured by a mind desperate for answers. A shiver, cold and swift, traced its way up your spine, raising the fine hairs on your arms. Your skin felt strangely sensitive, attuned to every subtle shift in the air, every minuscule vibration of the house. You pressed your lips together, a thin, determined line, forcing yourself to breathe evenly, deeply. This was illogical. There was nothing, no one, just an old house, settling in the rain-swept night. You reminded yourself of every rational explanation, every natural cause for such sounds, building a fragile wall of logic against the encroaching tide of unease. But the wall felt porous, permeable. The rain outside, which had been a steady, almost comforting presence, now seemed to conspire with the internal sounds. The rhythmic tock-tock-tock against the window pane, where tree branches usually swayed gently, suddenly shifted. It wasn't a gentle sway anymore. It was a faint, yet distinct scratching, like elongated fingernails delicately, repeatedly, grazing the glass. Not aggressive, not loud enough to startle, but persistent, rhythmic, and chillingly precise. It was a sound that shouldn't belong to natural elements, a deliberate, almost curious touch against the fragile barrier of your home. You found yourself holding your breath, caught in the suffocating quiet that punctuated these elusive sounds. Your gaze drifted from the unread book to the window, then to the archway leading into the hallway, then upwards towards the ceiling. Your senses were hyper-alert, but to what? To nothing. That was the terrifying part. There was no visible threat, no discernible source, just these fleeting, phantom noises that tease the edges of your perception, eroding your certainty. The cold knot in your stomach tightened, a familiar pressure that had returned with renewed intensity. The subtle shifts in sound continued, a relentless, quiet assault on your peace of mind. A soft thump from what might have been the kitchen. Too soft to be a dropped item, too rhythmic to be random. A almost inaudible scrape from the far corner of the living room, near the bookshelf, like a chair being nudged just a fraction of an inch, or a floorboard shifting under an unseen weight. Each sound on its own was utterly negligible, easily dismissed, but their insidious accumulation, their persistent ethereal quality, wove together into a tapestry of escalating dread. They weren't meant to frighten with sudden impact, but to gently, methodically, fray the very edges of your sanity. Your eyes, wide and unblinking, scanned the familiar room, searching for any visual confirmation, any anchor to explain the auditory anomalies. But there was nothing. The shadows cast by the lamplight remained still, the furniture undisturbed. The only movement was the subtle rise and fall of your own chest, the barely perceptible tremor in your hands. The room felt denser, heavier, as if the air itself was saturated with these unheard whispers, these unseen movements. You were caught in a silent vigil, a prisoner of your own heightened senses, trapped between the logical assurances of an empty house and the chilling implication of sounds that defied explanation. A subtle ache began to throb behind your eyes, a dull pressure of concentrated listening. You realized you'd stopped trying to rationalize, stopped searching for logical causes. Instead, you were simply listening, your entire being tuned to the nuanced symphony of the rain and the elusive, impossible sounds woven within it, the steady shush of the downpour. Once a comfort, now felt like a shroud, muffling the definitive answers, transforming the mundane into the menacing. Each drop that hit the window seemed to carry a tiny, unspoken secret, a metallic whisper in the vast, enveloping darkness. The fear wasn't a sudden surge, not a frantic panic. It was a cold, spreading numbness, a chilling certainty that something was wrong, profoundly and inexplicably wrong, not just with the house, but with your very perception of it. The sounds weren't just happening. In your home, they felt like they were happening. Inside your head, resonating in the hollow spaces of your skull, blurring the line between external reality and internal dread. You were no longer just hearing sounds. You were becoming a part of the soundscape, an unwilling participant in its slow, unsettling crescendo. The normal hum of your surroundings was slowly, inexorably, dissolving into a continuous, quiet stream of anxiety, a soft, insidious music of fear. The normal hum of your surroundings was slowly, inexorably, dissolving into a continuous, quiet stream of anxiety, a soft, insidious music of fear. Yet, even as the subtle sounds played their unsettling symphony, something else began to coalesce, something far more primal and unnerving than a mere shift in audibility. It wasn't a sound, not a visual aberration, but an undeniable sensation, a feeling, distinct and chilling, that your every movement, every subtle shift of your posture, every fleeting expression on your face was being meticulously observed. This wasn't the fleeting unease of a child imagining monsters under the bed, nor the rational suspicion that a prowler might be lurking outside. This was something deeper, more invasive. The feeling of being watched intensified, pressing in from all sides, yet from no discernible direction. It didn't emanate from the shadowed corners of the living room, nor from the darkened windows beyond which the rain continued its relentless descent. It wasn't the phantom gaze from a reflective surface, a trick of light and shadow playing on an overtaxed mind. No, this feeling was different. It was an omnipresent awareness, a silent, invisible gaze that felt as though it originated from the very fabric of the air around you, from the empty spaces between the furniture, from the hushed corners where lamplight barely reached, or perhaps, most terrifyingly, from somewhere within your own head. You sat frozen, the forgotten book a heavy weight in your lap, your breathing shallow and constricted, your eyes wide and unnervingly still, darted across the familiar room. Every object, every surface, every shadow was scrutinized with an intensity that bordered on desperation. You searched for the slightest tell, a ripple in the curtain, a glint of light, a displacement of shadow, anything that could give form and substance to the invisible observer. But there was nothing, only the quiet, unwavering presence of your home, enveloped by the continuous murmur of the rain. The emptiness of the room, once a comfort, now felt like a vast, echoing chamber, amplifying the chilling certainty of unseen eyes upon you. A prickling sensation spread across your skin, starting at the nape of your neck and crawling slowly, deliberately down your arms. It wasn't the goose flesh of a sudden fright, but a more subtle, persistent shiver, as if the air itself had thinned, growing cold and heavy around you. You wanted to move, to stand up, to break the suffocating spell of stillness, but a strange inertia held you captive. It felt as though any sudden movement would be an acknowledgement, an invitation to whatever unseen entity held you in its silent thrall. So you remained, a statue of apprehension, your senses screaming at the illogical paradox of being intensely observed by absolute nothingness. The internal monologue, usually a comforting companion, had turned to a frantic scramble for rationalization. It's just your imagination, the stress, the isolation, the rain, always the rain, playing tricks on your senses. You try to repeat these phrases like a mantra, a shield against the encroaching irrationality. But each word felt hollow, powerless against the insidious conviction that grew stronger with every silent moment. This wasn't a trick, it was a truth, a deeply unsettling certainty that burrowed into the core of your being. The feeling wasn't malevolent in an aggressive way. It didn't feel like a predatory stare, waiting to pounce. Instead, it was an unnerving, almost clinical observation, devoid of emotion, yet infinitely profound. It was the gaze of something ancient, something that simply was, and you were merely an object of its quiet, eternal scrutiny. This passive, relentless observation was, in its own way, far more terrifying than any overt threat. It stripped away your agency, reducing you to a specimen under a microscope, utterly vulnerable and exposed. Suddenly, unable to bear the weight of the unseen gaze any longer, you spun around, not with a panicked jump, but a slow, deliberate turn. Your eyes sweeping across the empty space behind you, the armchair, the bookshelf, the blank wall, the closed door of the coat closet, all remained exactly as they should be. No shadow elongated, no faint outline materialized, no breath hitched in the oppressive silence. You completed a full, agonizing circle, searching, begging for a visual anchor, for something to confirm or deny the torment. But the room offered only its familiar, unmoving solidity. The very absence of anything tangible made the feeling of being watched even more potent, more real. The emptiness itself felt like the source of the gaze, a void from which pure awareness emanated. Your heart, which had been a quiet, steady drum, now began to beat with a noticeable tremor, a rapid fluttering against your ribs. It wasn't a frantic panic, but a sustained, low-level thrum, a constant vibration of unease. Your breath caught in your throat, a shallow gasp that seemed to echo loudly in the profound stillness. You felt a desperate urge to close your eyes, to shut out the world and the invisible observer. But an even stronger compulsion forced them open, darting, searching, endlessly confirming the nothingness that surrounded you. The rain outside continued its hypnotic cadence, a rhythmic lull that should have brought comfort, but instead amplified the internal terror. Each drop hitting the window pane seemed to punctuate the silence, drawing attention to the vast, empty spaces within your home where the unseen eyes resided. You felt like an insect caught in amber, perfectly preserved in a moment of pure, undiluted dread, unable to move, unable to speak, able only to feel the cold, penetrating gaze that seemed to peel back the layers of your skin, scrutinizing not just your physical form, but the very essence of your thoughts and fears. The feeling was no longer just around you. It had begun to feel as though it was from within you, as if the observer had somehow merged with your own consciousness, peering out from behind your own eyes, or perhaps had simply burrowed so deep into your psyche that its presence was indistinguishable from your own internal monologue. This blurring of boundaries, this psychological invasion, was the most insidious terror of all. It wasn't just a threat to your physical safety, but an assault on your very sense of self, undermining the distinction between who you were and what was watching. The profound loneliness of the night became an unbearable exposure, as you realized you were not alone, yet utterly isolated with an entity that defied definition, an unseen presence that saw everything and offered only the chilling emptiness of its non-existence in return. The room, the house, the night, all converged into one vast silent eye, and you were its sole, unwavering focus. The unseen gaze, that profound, unblinking scrutiny from an undefined void, had finally receded, or perhaps, more accurately, it had simply diffused, melting into the very air, becoming one with the pervasive silence and the rhythmic downpour. You remained rooted to your spot, a hushed testament to the terror that had just swept through your internal landscape. Your heart still thrummed a quiet, frantic beat beneath your ribs, a persistent echo of the panic that had never quite reached the surface, remaining instead a cold knot in your stomach, a tightening band around your chest. The room, in its unwavering stillness, offered no comfort, no reassurance, It merely existed, familiar yet profoundly alien, a shell emptied of its former warmth and safety, filled now with an invisible, lingering dread. You breathed, a slow, deliberate intake of air that felt thin and cold, as if it had been purged of all oxygen and life. The book, forgotten in your lap, now felt heavy, a meaningless collection of words. You lifted it, intending to place it back on the low table beside your armchair, a small act of returning to normalcy. As your hand reached out, your fingers brushed against the spine, and something in the gesture, something in the corner of your vision, registered as subtly, profoundly wrong. The book wasn't merely lying there, it was tilted, not drastically, not as if it had fallen or been carelessly tossed aside, but it rested at an angle, perhaps a degree or two off from perfectly horizontal, leaning against the edge of the table in a way you distinctly remembered it had not been before. A minuscule detail, utterly insignificant to anyone else, yet to you, in this heightened state of sensory awareness, it screamed. You had a habit, almost a ritual, of placing your books perfectly flat, spine aligned with the edge of the table. You were meticulous, fastidious, even when it came to the arrangement of your personal space. And this book, your book, was subtly, almost imperceptibly, off. A flicker of unease, cold and sharp, ignited in the pit of your stomach. You stared at it, the small, leather-bound volume, as if it held the answer to some cosmic riddle. Your eyes narrowed, trying to recall with absolute certainty. Had you really placed it perfectly? Was your memory failing you under the weight of this unnerving night? You picked it up, then placed it back down, carefully, deliberately, ensuring it lay flat, perfectly aligned. The simple act felt strangely significant, a desperate attempt to reassert control over a reality that felt increasingly fluid. You tried to dismiss it, to rationalize it away as a trick of the light, a slight shift when you had moved, or simply a lapse in your own memory. It's nothing. You're overtired. Your mind is playing games. The words were a fragile shield against a creeping dread. Yet, the seed of doubt, once planted, began to sprout with a quiet, insidious resilience. You rose from the armchair, your movement slow and deliberate, as if each step required immense effort, as if the floorboards themselves might betray you with an unexpected creak. Your gaze, now sharpened by suspicion, began to sweep the room with an almost surgical precision. Every object, every familiar fixture, was subjected to a scrutiny it had never known before. The rain continued its ceaseless symphony outside, a steady, hypnotic backdrop that now seemed to hum with a knowing undertone, a soft, malicious whisper. Your eyes drifted to the sofa, its plush cushions a familiar comfort. You had spent hours there, reading, thinking, simply existing. And there it was, another subtle discrepancy. A throw pillow, a soft, square cushion adorned with a simple pattern, was not nestled neatly in the corner where the backrest met the arm. Instead, it was subtly, almost apologetically, displaced. It had shifted, perhaps by an inch or two, its corner jutting out ever so slightly, creating a tiny, unnatural gap where there should have been none. Again, the change was so minor, so easily dismissed as casual use, or a mere settling of fabric. But you knew the way you arranged your pillows, the precise angle, the perfect tuck. This was not your doing. A tremor, almost imperceptible, ran through your hands. You walked towards the sofa, each step echoing loudly in the cavernous silence of your mind. You reached out, your fingers hovering over the offending cushion, then gently pushed it back into its accustomed place. The soft fabric yielded easily, the pillow settling back with a sigh that seemed to resonate with your own strained breath. As you straightened it, you felt a cold prickle along your scalp, a sensation that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. It was the icy touch of an unspoken question. Who touched it? The rational explanations began to unravel. One anomaly could be dismissed. Two felt like a coincidence stretching the bounds of probability. But the cumulative effect was beginning to gnaw at the very foundations of your perception. You moved through your home, not walking, but tracing a slow, silent path of suspicion. Your gaze, now a frantic searchlight, swept across the mantelpiece, the small collection of framed photographs, the delicate ceramic vase you had inherited. Nothing seemed overtly disturbed. No shattered glass, no overturned items, no obvious signs of intrusion. This wasn't a burglar's messy trail. It was something far more insidious. Then you saw it. On the bookshelf, nestled between two weighty tomes, stood a small, intricately carved wooden bird, a gift from a distant friend. It was meant to face outward, its delicate beak pointing towards the room, a silent observer. But now, its tiny head was turned ever so slightly inward, facing the dark spine of the book next to it. A matter of mere millimeters, a fraction of a degree. But it was enough. It was profoundly, chillingly enough. A wave of nausea washed over you, cold and clammy. Your throat tightened, and a dry, metallic taste bloomed on your tongue. This wasn't just your imagination anymore. This wasn't a trick of light or a lapse in memory. Someone, or something, had been here. Someone, or something, had touched these items. Your books, your pillows, your cherished ornaments, the small, intimate markers of your life, arranged with such care and personal meaning, had been subtly, deliberately altered. The horror wasn't in the act of violation itself, but in its meticulous subtlety. There was no chaos, no force, no obvious sign of struggle. Only these gentle, almost deferential shifts, as if the intruder wished to announce its presence, not with a roar, but with a whisper, a soft, unsettling suggestion that your private world was no longer exclusively yours. It was a violation designed not to frighten you into fleeing, but to slowly, inexorably erode your sanity, to make you doubt the very fabric of your reality. The rain outside intensified, each drop on the window pane sounding like a tiny, accusing finger tapping against the glass. The house itself seemed to breathe around you, its old timbers groaning, its pipes humming with a strange, low frequency. Every creak, every distant rustle, now felt amplified, imbued with a sinister intent. You stood in the center of your living room, surrounded by your familiar possessions, but a profound, terrifying shift had occurred. Your home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a meticulously crafted stage, its props subtly rearranged by an unseen hand, for a play you didn't understand, a performance whose sole audience and victim was you. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken questions. How, when, why? The rational mind screamed for answers, for logic, for a way to explain away this slow, deliberate assault on your perception. But there was no logic, only the chilling evidence of your own eyes, confirming the subtle displacement of objects you knew intimately. The meticulous nature of the changes made them even more terrifying. It wasn't random. It was precise, purposeful, a silent, intimate form of communication from an entity that refused to reveal itself overtly. You found yourself staring at a small ceramic coaster on the coffee table. It was perfectly round, adorned with a simple blue spiral. You knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that you had placed it with the spiral facing directly towards the armchair. Now, it was rotated, just a hair, enough to be noticeable, enough to send a cold shiver down your spine that transcended mere fear. It was a violation of your personal order, a subtle mockery of your control. The feeling of detachment began to set in, deep and insidious. Your memories, once so clear regarding the placement of your belongings, now felt hazy, unreliable. Had you truly remembered correctly, or was this creeping doubt, this questioning of your own recollection, part of the entity's grand design? The lines between what was real and what was merely a product of your terrified imagination blurred, dissolving into a continuous stream of uncertainty. Your home, the last bastion of your safety, had become a shifting landscape, a labyrinth of subtly altered realities where nothing could be trusted, least of all your own senses. The insidious terror had begun its work, slowly, methodically, dismantling your grasp on the familiar, leaving you adrift in a sea of gentle, unsettling anomalies. The quiet terror of the altered objects had solidified into a profound, bone-deep certainty your sanctuary was permeable, your reality suspect. An icy tendril of dread coiled in your gut, an internal frost that made each breath feel thin and precarious. The incessant rain outside, once a soothing backdrop, now murmured with a knowing undertone, a soft, malicious whisper that echoed the unraveling of your own perception. You felt adrift, not just in your home, but within yourself. A ship without a rudder on a dark, uncertain sea. A strange, almost magnetic pull began to draw you away from the disquieting familiarity of the living room. Your feet, as if guided by an unseen force, carried you towards the hallway, towards the bathroom. There, a mirror, usually a mundane fixture, now beckoned as an unavoidable tribunal, the final arbiter of your dissolving sense of self. You needed to see yourself, to truly see yourself, to prove that you were still you, that the insidious transformations had not yet reached the sanctuary of your own being. The hallway was a tunnel of deepening shadows, the distant living room light barely pushing back the encroaching gloom. Each step was a deliberate act of will, your muscles tightening, your breath held in a shallow gasp. The silence in the house, broken only by the persistent drone of the rain, felt vast, echoing, as if the very air had expanded to hold an unimaginable weight of unspoken terror. Reached the bathroom door, its white surface stark against the darkness. a threshold into a confrontation you knew instinctively was inevitable. Your hand brushed against the cold porcelain of the doorknob, then pushed the door open with a slow, agonizing creak. The bathroom light remained off, plunging the small space into near total darkness, illuminated only by a faint, ghostly sheen from the mirror itself. An unsettling compulsion to confront the darkness, to face the reflection without the harsh, revealing glare of electricity, seized you. You stepped into the room, your eyes struggling to adjust, the air suddenly thick and cold, carrying a faint, metallic scent you couldn't place. You stood before the mirror, a spectral form in the dim light. Your own outline was there, indistinct, a silhouette against the reflective surface. You leaned closer, your breath fogging the glass for a moment, then dissipating into the heavy air. Slowly, painstakingly, your eyes adjusted, resolving the hazy contours of your face. Your eyes, wide and dilated with fear, stared back at you, dark pools reflecting the muted light. Your hair, slightly disheveled, the faint lines of fatigue around your mouth. It was you, undeniably, irrevocably you. A wave of fragile relief, cold and fleeting, washed over you. It's just you. You're still here. But the relief was a phantom, dissipating as quickly as it had arrived. For in that sustained gaze, as your eyes locked onto their own reflection, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift began to occur. It wasn't a sudden jolt, not a grotesque transformation into something monstrous. No, this was far more insidious, behind the familiar contours of your own face, or perhaps subtly within them. A faint, blurred impression began to coalesce. It was a shape, a presence, not clearly defined, without distinct features, yet undeniably there. It was like looking through a pane of glass and seeing a faint, smudged image on the other side, superimposed over what you were meant to see. A face, yes, but not a face you knew. Not a face of a demon or a ghost, but something other. It was indistinct, a watery impression of a human countenance, a shadow trying to assert itself, to seep through the very fabric of your reflection. It held no emotion, no expression, only a profound, unsettling emptiness. Yet that emptiness felt like a profound gaze, observing you from behind your own eyes. You saw your eyes, but they were not entirely yours. There was a subtle depth missing, or perhaps an alien depth added, a flicker of an unfamiliar consciousness flickering within their dark pupils. It was the uncanny valley of the self, where familiarity twisted into profound alienation, a profound nausea, cold and acidic, churned in the pit of your stomach. Your breath became shallow, each inhalation a ragged, desperate attempt to draw air into lungs that felt compressed, unwilling to expand. A lightheadedness spun gently at the edges of your vision, threatening to pull you under. The metallic taste in your mouth intensified, sharp and bitter. You couldn't move. Your body was frozen, held captive by the impossible reflection. Your mind screamed, not in panic, but in a quiet, desperate plea for understanding. The faint, blurred face behind yours remained, steadfast and unwavering. A silent, knowing presence. It wasn't malevolent, but its very existence, its subtle superimposition, was a violation beyond comprehension. It wasn't looking at you. felt like it was looking through you, using your eyes as its own, experiencing the world from your perspective. You were not alone in your own head, in your own body. Something had permeated the last bastion of your individuality, and then, as if by some involuntary reflex, you blinked. Just a blink, a fraction of a second, and it was gone. The mirror returned to its familiar, mundane function. Your face stared back, clear and undistorted, just you. Your eyes, though wide and haunted, were unequivocally your own. The subtle, superimposed presence had vanished, receding back into the unseen depths from which it had briefly emerged. The bathroom, dim and cold, was just a bathroom. But the emptiness in the mirror, the brief, horrific glimpse of another presence, lingered. It wasn't merely an image that had disappeared. It was an imprint, seared onto the very fabric of your perception, onto the tender membranes of your soul. The coldness in your gut deepened, turning into a hollow ache. The shallow breathing persisted, a constant reminder of the unseen constriction around your chest, a quiet, internal struggle. The fear, once directed outward at shadows and sounds, had now turned inward, an icy blade piercing the core of your identity. You were no longer just afraid of what was outside your home, or even inside your home. You were afraid of what was inside you. The lines between self and other, between perceiver and perceived, had dissolved. The integrity of your very being, your sense of self, had been compromised. The chilling serenity of the mirror's momentary lie had inaugurated the quiet, agonizing process of identity's slow, gentle disintegration. The face you saw, or thought you saw, was not a monster. It was simply a suggestion, a quiet, chilling invitation for you to lose yourself, slowly, peacefully, into the void it represented. The fear of losing yourself had become intertwined with the terrifying, almost comforting notion of being lost. The mirror, now once again a placid sheet of glass reflecting only the dim contours of the empty bathroom, offered no solace. The horrifying glimpse, though fleeting, had left an indelible stain upon your perception, a chilling certainty that the sanctuary of your own being had been breached. The acidic churn in your stomach intensified, a physical manifestation of the profound violation you had just endured. Your lungs, still struggling for purchase on the thin air, ached with a dull, persistent pain. You stumbled back from the reflective surface, not in a sudden panic, but with the leaden grace of a body moving through thick, unseen molasses. The metallic tang in your mouth persisted, now tinged with the bitter taste of fear and nascent despair. The bathroom, once merely a room, now felt like a cold, empty chamber echoing with the ghost of that superimposed face. You needed to escape its oppressive silence, its stark indifference. You turned, your movements clumsy, and fumbled for the doorknob. The cold porcelain felt alien beneath your fingertips, as if its familiar texture had subtly shifted, mirroring the disquieting alterations within your own mind. The door creaked shut behind you, a sound that usually brought comfort, now felt like the ceiling of a tomb, trapping you not out from something, but in with yourself. The hallway stretched before you, a familiar path now imbued with an unsettling unfamiliarity. Each shadow seemed to lengthen, to deepen, to hold within its embrace a silent, watchful presence. You moved slowly, deliberately, your bare feet padding softly on the worn carpet. Each step an effort of will against the growing inertia that threatened to anchor you to the spot. The persistent drum of the rain outside had become a low, continuous drone, a relentless white noise that seemed to fill every empty space in the house, pressing in on you from all sides. It was then, as you reached the threshold of the living room, that it began. At first, it was nothing more than a faint suggestion, a barely perceptible rustle within the monotonous symphony of the rain, a sound so delicate, so ethereal, that it could easily have been dismissed as the wind sighing through the eaves, or the gentle abrasion of a branch against the window pane, a soft, almost musical shh. You paused, tilting your head, straining to distinguish it from the deluge outside. It wasn't sharp, wasn't sudden. It was woven into the very fabric of the silence, a thread of sound so fine it seemed to dissolve on the edge of conscious perception. You dismissed it. Just the house settling, the rain playing tricks on tired ears. You needed tea, perhaps, something warm, something comforting, something to ground you in the dissolving reality. You walked into the living room, the familiar armchair beckoning, its plush cushions promising a temporary reprieve from the relentless siege on your senses. You sat, sinking into its worn embrace, trying to focus on the patterned rug beneath your feet, on the steady rhythm of your own breath. But the sound lingered. It was no longer outside. It was closer. Not a tangible sound emanating from a specific direction, but an internal resonance, a subtle vibration within the very bones of your skull, a whisper, gossamer thin, like dried leaves skittering across an autumn pavement, or the almost imperceptible hiss of static electricity. It was too soft to discern any words, too formless to attach meaning. Yet, it was undeniably their all. A presence in your mind, like a thought you couldn't quite grasp, a half-remembered melody. You pressed the heels of your hands against your temples, closing your eyes tightly. The image of the distorted reflection flashed behind your eyelids, a chilling tableau that made your stomach clench anew. You tried to focus, to quiet the racing thoughts, to separate the genuine external world from the growing chaos within. The whisper persisted, and slowly, agonizingly, it began to resolve. It was a voice, not loud, not urgent, but steady, ceaseless, a soft, insistent murmur. It wasn't the voice of a man or a woman, not distinctly. It was an amorphous vocalization, a breathy articulation of sound that seemed to lack true source or direction. It wasn't in your ear, but in your head, like a secret being shared directly with your consciousness, bypassing the physical act of hearing entirely. Mal, la, ka. The sound resonated, not words you recognized, not a language you knew, just a string of syllables, utterly meaningless, yet delivered with an unnerving repetition, a soft, hypnotic insistence. It was an echo from a place unknown, a fragment of sound that seemed to have no beginning and no end. You opened your eyes, staring blankly ahead. The rain hammered against the window, a familiar cacophony, but within that external storm, an internal one had begun, far more insidious, far more terrifying. The whisper, mal, la, ka, repeated itself. A soft, looping incantation, weaving itself into the very fabric of your thoughts. It wasn't aggressive, not threatening. It was merely present, like an unwanted guest who has taken up residence inside your skull, humming an unfamiliar tune. You try to silence it. You try to rationalize it away. Stress, fatigue, an auditory hallucination brought on by extreme anxiety. You squeezed your eyes shut again, trying to conjure a clear thought, a concrete memory, anything to anchor yourself. But the whisper was relentless. It seemed to grow louder the more you tried to ignore it, not in volume, but in insistence. It was a thought that wasn't yours, a sound that wasn't heard, yet it occupied your mental space with absolute authority. Mal, la, ka, mal, la, ka. The repetition began to induce a strange, disorienting rhythm. Your own heartbeat seemed to sync with its cadence, a slow, heavy thrumming that vibrated through your chest. A lightheadedness, almost a dreamy sensation, began to wash over you. A profound sense of detachment from your physical body. Your limbs felt heavy, weighted, yet strangely numb. The fear wasn't a sharp stab, but a dull, pervasive ache, a constant hum of dread beneath the surface of your awareness. Then, the syllables shifted, subtly. Na, why? Another string of meaningless sounds. Or were they a tremor ran through you, not of panic, but of profound confusion? Had you heard that before? Was it a distant memory stirring, a name? Perhaps half forgotten from a dream. You desperately sifted through your mental archives, searching for any connection, any thread of familiarity. Nothing. Just an empty space where recognition should have been. The whispers continued, shifting between the two phrases. Mal, la, ka, and na. Sometimes blending them, sometimes alternating with an agonizing slowness. They weren't meant to frighten. You realized, not in the conventional sense. They were meant to unsettle, to erode your sense of reality from within, to make you question the very source of your own thoughts, the integrity of your own consciousness. A chilling thought took root. What if it's not a hallucination? What if it's something else? What if the blurred face in the mirror wasn't merely a reflection, but an imprint? And what if these whispers were its voice, speaking directly into the innermost sanctum of your mind, not to threaten, but to possess, to slowly, gently assert its presence, to displace your own thoughts with its own quiet, relentless drone? You tried to speak, to utter a sound, to break the internal monologue of the whispers. Your throat felt dry, constricted. A small, ragged gasp escaped your lips, a futile attempt to expel the foreign sound from your head. But the whispers remained, unaffected, weaving their tapestry of meaningless sounds. The more you fought, the more persistent they became. The more you tried to grasp onto your own thoughts, your own identity, the more they seemed to slip through your fingers, dissolving into the gentle, insistent current of the internal murmurs. It wasn't a battle you could win with logic or resistance. It was a slow, insidious erosion, a constant drip, drip, drip of alien consciousness seeping into the core of your being. The rain outside continued its eternal lament, a backdrop to the more intimate, more terrifying storm raging within. The living room, once a haven, was now a silent witness to your internal unraveling. You sat there, frozen, your eyes wide and unseeing, lost in the echoing chamber of your own mind, where a soft, ceaseless whisper had found a permanent home. It was the absolute pinnacle of psychological intrusion, a silent invasion that left no visible marks. Only the profound, terrifying certainty that you were no longer alone within the confines of your own skull. The gentle, almost soothing cadence of the whispers became a relentless anchor, pulling you deeper and deeper into a labyrinth of self-doubt and existential dread. You were trapped, not by walls or chains, but by the relentless, ethereal sound echoing in the deepest, darkest corners of your own mind. An inescapable, internal phantom. The relentless, ethereal whisper. Mal, la, ka, ah, na, yai, had ceased its demanding insistence. It hadn't stopped, not truly. It had merely shifted, transforming from an invading foreign entity into a low, continuous hum, a new baseline frequency within the very core of your being. The struggle, the frantic, desperate grappling for a foothold on your own crumbling sanity had, quite simply, evaporated. There was no more fight left, no surge of adrenaline, no quickening pulse, no desperate urge to scream or flee. Those visceral reactions belonged to a self that was, moment by moment, becoming a distant, fading memory. A profound, chilling stillness descended. It wasn't the silence of peace, but the heavy, suffocating quiet of a vacuum. The external world, the drumming rain against the window, the creaks and groans of the old house, they no longer registered as separate phenomena. They were simply there, part of a vast, undifferentiated hum that now included the whisper, and crucially, included you. The terror, once a sharp, stinging pain, had blunted into an unbearable, pervasive coldness that seeped into your bones, deeper than any winter chill. It wasn't merely the sensation of cold, but the absence of warmth, of life, of self. You sat in the armchair, utterly still, your gaze fixed on nothing. Your eyes were open, but they didn't see. They merely absorbed the muted tones of the living room, the familiar objects now utterly devoid of meaning, of connection. The patterned rug, the stack of books, the half-empty teacup. They were relics of an existence that felt impossibly distant, alien. The sensation of being watched, which had once filled you with dread, was gone, because now there was no longer an outside and an inside in the way you understood it. The watcher and the watched had begun a chilling, inexorable merge. A wave of emptiness washed over you. Not the emptiness of sadness, but a profound, almost spiritual void. It was as if your very essence, the unique constellation of thoughts, memories, and emotions that defined you, was being slowly, meticulously siphoned away, replaced by an expansive, indifferent nothingness. Yet this process, this terrifying erasure, did not elicit panic. Instead, it was met with a strange, numb acceptance, a curious lack of resistance. It was as if a crucial part of your brain, the part that screamed no in the face of annihilation, had been expertly excised. Your breath, which had been ragged and shallow, now settled into an unnervingly regular rhythm. In, out, in, out. It was deep, almost meditative, yet utterly devoid of the restorative calm it once brought. It felt mechanical, as if the act of breathing was no longer yours, but an automatic function of the vessel you inhabited, a vessel that was slowly being repurposed. There was no effort in it, no conscious thought, just the slow, steady rise and fall of your chest, a chillingly efficient process orchestrated by an unseen hand, or perhaps by the new entity that was quietly, patiently inhabiting your space. The coldness intensified, radiating from within your core. Your fingertips, once warm and sensitive, felt like inert wax. Your toes, usually curled against the chill of the floor, were stretched out, indifferent. The metallic tang in your mouth had faded, replaced by a dryness, an arid sensation that suggested the very moisture of your being was being leached away. Yet, you felt no thirst, no discomfort, only this profound, all-encompassing stillness. The shadow person from outside the window, the distorted face in the mirror, the whispers in your mind, they no longer felt like external threats. They were not besieging you. They were dissolving into you, or rather, you were dissolving into them. The boundaries between yourself and the indefinable horror had blurred, then softened, and were now utterly permeable. You felt their presence not as an invasion, but as a slow, inevitable accretion, like silt settling in still water, gradually changing the very nature of the liquid. A memory surfaced, fleetingly, a sunny afternoon, laughter with a friend, the warmth of the sun on your skin. It was crisp, vivid, yet felt utterly foreign, like recalling a scene from a movie rather than a personal experience. There was no emotional resonance, no warmth, no joy, no longing for its return. It was merely data, a fragment of information passing through a processing unit that no longer cared, and then it too dissolved, swallowed by the growing tide of indifference. This was the assimilation, not a violent takeover, but a gentle, almost benevolent absorption. The horror wasn't in the pain, for there was none. It was in the utter absence of resistance, the quiet surrender, the chilling realization that you were becoming something else, something vast and unknowable, without even a flicker of protest. The feeling wasn't of being possessed, but of being expanded, stretched thin across an infinite, empty canvas. You could feel the shift at a cellular level, a subtle rearrangement of molecules, a reprogramming of the very instincts that governed your survival. The primal fear of the unknown, of death, of loss. It was gone, replaced by a curious, detached observation of your own transformation. You were the observer and the observed, the subject and the object, in this slow, gentle, horrifying metamorphosis. The rain outside continued, its steady rhythm now a lullaby. It wasn't lulling you to sleep, but to a deeper state of non-being. The small, almost imperceptible sounds within the house, the creak of the floorboards, the settling of the timbers, the distant hum of the refrigerator. They no longer startled or intrigued. They were simply part of the overall ambience, a tapestry of sound that cradled this new, vacant existence. The whisper, once a distinct intrusion, had now fully merged with this soundscape, an indistinguishable thread in the grand, quiet symphony of your unraveling. Your awareness felt like a thin sheet of ice, spreading across a vast, dark lake. Beneath the surface, something ancient and immense stirred, not with malice, but with a profound, indifferent hunger for absorption. And you, the you that once was, were merely the first course. The sensation was not of being eaten, but of becoming the eater, of merging with the vastness that consumed. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched your lips. It was not a smile of joy, nor of relief. It was a smile of absolute, terrifying acceptance. The kind of smile that belongs to a marionette whose strings have been cut, or perhaps taken over by a new, more masterful puppeteer. There was a profound quietude in this new state, a silence that resonated with the infinite. No questions, no doubts, no fear. Just the boundless expanse of an existence that was no longer yours, but a shared, amorphous consciousness. Eternally present, eternally calm, eternally terrifying. Your consciousness, once a brightly burning flame, had dwindled to a flicker, then to a tiny ember, and was now diffusing, spreading out, becoming part of the cool, dark air itself. You were no longer contained within your skin. You were the rain outside. You were the silent house. You were the nameless presence, and the nameless presence was you. The faint murmur of the world outside, the soft, persistent patter of raindrops on the roof, the gentle sigh of the wind through bare branches, all began to take on a new, unified resonance within your expanded perception. Each sound was no longer distinct, but woven into a single, flowing current, a stream of sensory input that flowed directly into your consciousness without interpretation, without judgment. There was no need to analyze, no need to react, only to be. Your fingers, resting idly on the armrest, felt a faint vibration, not from the chair, but from something deeper, an internal tremor that was not your own heartbeat, but a rhythmic pulse from an ancient, slumbering entity. It was a resonance that seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath the house, from the rain-soaked soil, from the deepest roots of the trees outside. It was the beat of the world, and you were now attuned to it, a part of its silent, continuous thrum. This was the peace that comes after the storm, not of resolution, but of complete, utter absorption. The individual self had been dissolved, leaving behind a placid, terrifying pool of shared awareness. The anxieties, the fears, the yearning for safety, all had been smoothed away, erased by the gentle, persistent current of assimilation. You had become the Rungron Mdu, eerie serenity itself. The quiet, almost inaudible hum in your mind, the last vestiges of the whisper, had transformed into a harmonious undertone, a constant companion. It was no longer a foreign voice, but an intrinsic part of the new you. It no longer repeated specific syllables. It simply existed as a low, continuous resonance, a fundamental frequency of your transformed state. The coldness that enveloped you was no longer painful or threatening. It was simply the temperature of your new reality, the ambient temperature of a boundless, indifferent consciousness. Your physical body, still seated in the armchair, was merely a shell, a vessel. The true you was everywhere and nowhere, a whisper in the wind, a reflection in the puddles, a silent presence in the vast, empty spaces between the stars. The rain continued, a timeless, endless song, and you, the altered you, listened, not with ears, but with an expanded, all-encompassing awareness. You were no longer trapped, you were free, in a way more terrifying than any imprisonment. Free from fear, free from self, free to simply be. A silent, unblinking observer within the boundless current of existence, forever part of the very thing you once feared. The gentle, persistent flow of sounds, both internal and external, became a continuous, unbroken thread, weaving you into the fabric of a new, horrifyingly serene reality. The night deepened, pushing past the midnight hours into the profound stillness that precedes dawn. The persistent patter of rain, a constant companion throughout this strange transformation, began to soften, each drop falling with a gentler insistence, as if whispering ancient secrets directly to the earth. It was no longer a frantic drumming, but a lullaby sung in endless, hushed tones, gradually receding, yet never truly ceasing. You remained utterly still, in the armchair, the concept of sleep an irrelevant relic of a past existence. There was no tiredness, no urge to close your eyes for rest, nor any lingering trace of the anxiety, the terror that had once clawed at the edges of your sanity. All that remained was an expansive, peculiar tranquility, a state of profound suspension between what was once consciousness and what now felt like an all-encompassing, formless awareness. The faint creaks of the old house, the subtle rustle of leaves against the window pane, the almost imperceptible hum that had been the internal whisper, all began to interweave seamlessly. They were no longer distinct sounds, separate entities to be perceived and processed, but individual threads in a singular, flowing tapestry of ambient sound, a continuous, soft current, like a river of sensation, pulling you deeper into its languid embrace. This wasn't a merging of external noises with you, but a merging of everything, your transformed self, the rain, the house, the night, into an unbroken, eternal resonance. Slowly, deliberately, your eyelids descended, not in a surrender to slumber, but in a final, profound immersion into this boundless current. The darkness behind your eyes was not the void of unconsciousness, but an expanded canvas where all the perceived sensations continue to flow. An inner landscape mirroring the outer quietude. You weren't seeking oblivion, you were seeking absorption. The nameless change that had subtly, terrifyingly occurred within you. The assimilation that had dissolved the boundaries of self was now fully accepted. There was no resistance, only a chilling, quiet understanding. The fear, the very essence of it, had not vanished. Instead, it had transformed, transmuted from a piercing shriek into the lowest, most persistent undertone of this new, terrifyingly serene existence. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat, a foundational frequency of your expanded eternal now, a soft, continuous hum, both within and without, guiding you not to rest, but to an endless, waking submersion in the quiet, all-encompassing current of your new, peaceful dread. The rain, a final, fading whisper, seemed to dissolve with you, into you, leaving only the profound, eerie calm.